And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here, back with another AFL round review. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the pleasure of talking about the first of the two Mongrel rounds. As round 10 has come, it has gone. How magnificent is Mongrel round, the incredibly fantastic Guernseys that we get to see. And I have the pleasure of a very good friend of mine hopping on a podcast, a fellow footy loving American. We have Mr. Rick Shaibani. Rick, it is great to see you, sir.
Great to see you as always, Donnie. Appreciate you having me on, mate. I know it's been a while, but yes, it's always a pleasure to talk footy. As you can see, we're both repping our USAFL clubs respectively. So Carn the Roosters and Up the Dragons. So it's great to be here. We've got a lot of thoughts on round 10, obviously. Like you said, Marn Grook, Indigenous round, Sir Doug Nicholls, Indigenous round, whatever you want to call it. Boy, it's fun. It's just fun. Like you like the pregame pageantry is really cool. The Guernsey
Mhm.
design are always unique. I love that they always get at least one indigenous bloke from each team to kind of contribute to the design a little bit. They always
Mhm.
kind of tell a unique story. And also Sir Doug Nicholls. Like I don't know how you or how many other footy fans out there know a ton about Sir Doug Nicholls, but he was a great bloke, a really good person. He was a Christian pastor in addition to being a footy player. He was tiny, even for his era. He was, I think, 5'2" to use non-metric. Bear with me there. No,
Mhm.
but yeah, no. It's he was a great guy, and it's great that the Indigenous round exists. And yeah, it's kind of cool to see everyone get around it. I know there's been some concern over the number of Indigenous players hasn't been as high as it's been in recent years. Hopefully that can inch its way up year over year. There's lots of talent out there that sometimes doesn't always get the AFL opportunities. So hopefully there can be some more work there and we can see those numbers increase. But
Yeah.
it's a great round of footy and we saw some really interesting games, didn't we?
Yep, that we did, which is a perfect segue. Round 10, it has come, it has gone. So just quickly, because I know you and I can get to be chatty, and I love our conversations when we have it. So round 10, your thoughts on the first of the two Munger rounds.
Boy, I mean, I think probably if we're talking about statements, I think Gold Coast had a great win. Obviously, Frio has been on a hot streak. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's club record or an equal record, 9 straight wins.
Mhm.
So, boy, the Dockers are hot. I think you could probably pencil in. I know it's top six, not top four. It's crazy how you have to kind of
Mhm.
recalibrate your brain
Yep.
footy wise to be like, oh yeah, the wild card round. Now I personally wasn't a fan at first. I thought it was just kind of maybe change for the sake of change, but it is what it is. It exists now. In terms of top six, definitely 3-0 is going to be very dangerous. And obviously, they're going to want to get a home final. So if they can stay hot, I mean, watch out. Adelaide, an absolute day out against North. I mean, we'll talk about North. I mean, it seems like one step forward, 10 steps back for them sometimes. Brisbane, there's some warning signs there. Hawthorne, definitely some warning signs there. Doggies are injured to hell. Giants are injured to hell. Richmond Tigers are injured to hell. It's very dire situations in some clubs, and also just like we could have a wooden spoon matchup coming up with Richmond Essendon. So we've got a lot of games to talk about. So back to you. I know you want to go in order, and you have some burning questions too.
Nine interesting games, and only a couple that I would say we really need to sit down and talk about, because a couple of these were embarrassingly bad performances, unfortunately, in a couple of ways, especially one that you discussed there. But let's start off. Probably one of the first of a few shockers this round 10, as the Cats go up to the Gabba and spank the Brisbane Lions like a misbehaving child. 117-76, a 41-point win. And I will not lie with you, as I watched this fourth quarter, I literally could not believe what I was watching. And it really does kind of come, as you kind of said, is that, are there questions about Brisbane's want to try to win another flag? Because they got pantsed on their home patch. And usually, Briz Vegas is usually very difficult to go up to the GABA and get a win.
No, you're spot on, dude. It's yeah, I think that was a statement win. And obviously it's a grand final rematch. The media always hypes those up. But boy, yeah, Geelong definitely took no prisoners. I think Sean Manna, that was a hell of
Hmm.
a game, good sir. He's a young kid that I know they're really excited about. He's a guy who can get overshadowed by others in that side, but boy, he's not going to be overlooked anymore after a game like that. That soccer goal from what was it, like 30 meters out? I was like,
Hmm.
that's one of those, pardon my French, you've got to be shitting me moments. It's like
Hmm.
the footy can just bounce such an amazing way sometimes. And I think he was as surprised as anyone in the stadium in terms of, boy, that actually went in. But
Hmm.
Bailey Smith dominated again. I think he had 33 or 34
34,
disposals.
34 and a couple of goals. Yep.
Oh, he did, and boy, he's on or off field, he's going to make headlines. But boy,
Hmm.
he's exciting, and Jeremy Cameron's having a dominant season. Apart from that night, he was a little inaccurate, 3 goals, three, but he is having a hell of a season.
Yep.
You do wonder if maybe he could push for a Coleman again. Never say never. But yeah, no, it was tough conditions too. That was what
Hmm.
was puzzling, I think, because Brisbane, they're good in humid conditions. I believe it
Yep.
rained a little bit. I'm not sure if it was raining during the match, but it definitely was raining pregame. And yeah, definitely some concerns in terms of like, apart from guys like Charlie Cameron, Dunkley, there's not really that many guys with lines who are really putting their hand up. And just I don't know if, like you said, it might be a desire thing. It might be
Hmm.
just not being consistent over 4 quarters. But there's some concerns. But flags aren't won in May. They've got
Yep.
time to get it right. They've obviously got the magnoscope or the microscope on them because of you know the idea of three-peating again. That would be
Hmm.
crazy. But I mean, Chris Fagan, he's a veteran coach. He knows what he's doing. There's concerns, but they'll be able to get healthier. Get back in the film room and kind of analyze where they're not really doing so hot. One more shout out for Geelong. Really like the way they're developing the young Irish kid, O'Sheen Mullen.
Hmm.
Obviously, the Cats have a really good history of taking Irish kids, Gaelic football converts, developing them. Of course, Zach Tui, Mark O'Connor. Mullen has been steadily developing. I think he's a guy. Sometimes he tags players, sometimes he doesn't. He's kind of a guy you can move around. So I think he's a very promising player, and hopefully, if he's healthy, he can be a mainstay in that starting 23.
Definitely for sure. The one thing is that he's kind of slowly shedding the he's just a tagger moniker, which I think some people were like, oh, he can only tag. He's the Gaelic guy. He's the Gaelic guy. He hasn't really picked up the skills. And he's starting to show that isn't him a little bit, which I love because that shows the development.
Sure.
And again, Coach Scott is a genius. I mean, he always seems to find a way, but has Brisbane been found out a little bit? Or is it a combination of again, Oscar McInerney has retired. Sam Draper really fully engulfed into the Brisbane way. We'll have to see. I think he's been a little bit down compared to what I kind of thought. I thought he would be really, really good in Brisbane colors because of his athleticism and that already great midfield. And then you add a midfielding ruck, which I thought the new ruck rules would really benefit Sam Draper. And it hasn't resulted as well as much as I thought it would. Again, I think he's still getting used to it. There's been some inconsistency in their defensive core. I know Zorko was a laid out in this particular game, which irritated me as a fantasy owner, considering he was my captain or was my captain. Thankfully, I moved off of him. But it's one of those where it's like you could tell that they missed his kickoff halfback, his ability to kind of open up defenses. Jasper Fletcher, I think is eventually going to shift back there again and kind of take that spot. So I agree with you. I'm not one of those that's sitting here that's like, oh my God, Brisbane is done. No, but I am going to say this is that they can only dig themselves out of holes so many times consecutively, year after year after year, before eventually it's going to bite them. And I worry that maybe this year could be the year that that's not going to be the case. I don't know if they're going to be able to in a 10 team tournament, in a 10 team finals this year, if they're going to be able to do what they've done twice now, and that's kind of dig themselves out of a hole, get into finals, and then just kind of be that best team. Fremantle, Sydney, Hawthorn, I mean, keep an eye
Yeah,
out because they're starting to separate. And if Brisbane is too far down, if they're in that 5, 6, 7, 8 spot, it's going to be super difficult to try to beat those top teams when they're
yeah,
playing some really good footy. Again, I agree with you. You aren't going to win a premiership in May, but you can damn sure set yourself up to, and you can damn sure lose it in May as well. So, speaking of a premiership talking team, and that is, let's go up to the SCG where the result at the end was probably what we expected. Sydney get the 4 points. It
sure.
was how they won was, I think, the eye opener for a lot of people because no Pendlebury, no Darcy Cameron. Oscar
Yeah,
Steen goes down with a knee injury halfway through the third quarter, and the Swans started off terribly and got down 33 points in the first quarter. And I think a lot of people, even myself, was going, "Uh-oh, d- uh-oh, are we over analyzing how good Sydney is at the start of the year? And is
mhm,
Collingwood a good
yeah,
team when maybe all the pressure's off because Pendlebury's not playing because all of the talk, and again, I'm gonna go off on this. I don't know if you heard it, but I have to give a shout out to Craig Wessels. He had
yeah,
an epic rant on his podcast about the circus that the Pendlebury saga has become. And I fully agree with him. In fact, I messaged him after I listened to it. It was just like,
yeah.
dude, that was epic because
No,
I
I agree.
totally agree that they have made this so much about him. It's like if I'm a fellow Collingwood player, like I get Pendles is an incredible player, and it's hard. I've never heard anybody say bad things about Pendles ever, and I don't think you ever will because that's just not who Pendles is.
Right.
But I will say this: how they've handled this could cost them finals because they really are taking the entire team out of this just to pander to
Mhm.
Pendle's situation. And I get it. You want as many Collingwood supporters to be able to see it. I understand that. But I'm going to sit here and tell you this right now. If you ask a Collingwood supporter right now, if you miss the finals just to celebrate Pendle's thing at the MCG, are you going to be upset?
Right.
I bet you there's going to be some Pies fans that are going to be pretty steamed if they miss out on the 10 because they dropped this game and they dropped a game the game a couple weeks ago. I'd be pretty steamed if I'm a paying member because I'd like to go to finals. And for me
Right.
to make such a big deal about this, it really kind of slaps the other players in the face. Now, again,
Yeah,
this
no,
game was incredible.
I know what you're saying. And yeah, shout out to Craig Wessels, friend of the show. Right. I was talking to him about the exact same thing. So you and I are on the same page there overall. I was arguing in terms of big picture for the Pies. I mean, yeah, like, some other teams that are kind of scuffling right now. Yes, they can push for the 10, but it's going to take Herculean effort. We know that. That injury list is looking concerning. And yes, the Pendlebury milestone is huge. I agree with you and with Craig on that. But I was also arguing that operating under the assumption that the Pies have Craig McRae long term, which they should. He's, done a great job there. He's deserved to stay there as long as he wants. But that means they need to go into rebuild mode centered around the Dacos brothers. Now, I know there's been some occasional rumors of like Nick Dacos to Tassie. Apparently, that's just a rumor. His camp has denied it. I think they did.
I highly doubt it
Yeah.
with the family connection that they
No.
have. I
Yeah.
highly doubt that. Like I'm hearing talk now that Bo McCreary could be one of those guys that they try to nip.
Now,
Just be
I believe Bo McCreary is from Taxi
Yep,
originally. So that
yep,
does make more sense. There
yep.
you go. And yeah, I don't see it happening either. You're right. Of course, the Dacos family legacy at Collingwood is well established. Their dad, Josh, obviously. But
Hmm.
no, I think obviously the Pendlebury thing has become a distraction. And of course, yes, everyone respects him. It's a massive milestone. But yes, they are to an extent sacrificing the season in terms of, but at the same time, they do have the on paper excuse. Oh, he's a 38-year-old. We need to manage his workload.
Yep, yep,
We don't
yep.
want to burn him out. And of course, they're playing West Coast, a terrible team, so they'll most likely win.
I don't know.
Um,
I don't know
you
about
know,
that. Like
I mean, West Coast
we'll,
did.
we'll,
West
we'll,
Coast did have a
we'll talk about how they did a little bit later, but if I'm Collingwood, I
yeah,
don't like that West Coast maybe found a little bit of form and Harley Reid started playing better. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later,
sure,
but
sure, yeah,
and the fact that you lose Steed in this game, you get dominated by Brody Grundy, so you know that
right,
and Bailey J. Williams had himself a day too. So it's not like you're stepping up and getting a weak rucked team. I think you're stepping up and getting a team that's playing better. I don't like the mojo of Collingwood right now because they're so
yeah,
inconsistent, because they're making all of these concessions for this whole thing, which again, I fully understand. Did the Swans make Collingwood look a little bit better? Yes, I think the Swans played atrocious in the first quarter. Their skills, so many skills. They were letting Collingwood overpressure them, and they were making bad decisions. There were at least one of the rushes that turned into a holding the ball through the center through Chad Warner. He literally had Malcolm Rosas on the wing with an easy handball open into space. There we go. Nope, he tries to take on he doesn't see him,
yeah.
tries to take on tackler, gets tackled, holding the ball. So like one of the biggest
There's
things,
issues.
and
Yeah, I think
maybe it's just because I'm a fan of of a non-Victorian team. It really is infuriating when the announcers almost sound like they're barracking for Collingwood. Like everything Collingwood is doing is right, and
right,
everything that Sydney's on. No, like I'll give it to it. Collingwood had great pressure in the first quarter. They had good pressure in the second quarter. In the third and fourth quarter, I think they ran out of petrol tickets because I think they used so much to get the lead that they did. They didn't have it, and that's when Sydney kicked it into a second, third, and fourth gears, and Collingwood
right,
just didn't have the petrol tickets to go. And pushing Nick Dacos forward actually hurt them because now they couldn't get his impact on the footy. And then when he did go in there, well, he's a little bit tired, and James Jordan comes in, kind of locks him down a little bit. So it's like a lot of the things that you would think would help Collingwood get out of the issue that they had, they couldn't go to because they didn't have the petrol to be able to do it.
right. No, yeah, and I think the slow start for Sydney's concerned. I mean, I think just seeing Dean Cox's press conference, he was definitely concerned, and as he should be, in terms of like Collingwood came in with a great game plan
Hmm.
because what is Sydney good at? Going through the corridor, the quick handballs, drawing the defenders in, and then getting rid of the footy at the last second. They're very good at that, and they've done it really well without Errol Golden until recently. They've done a great job with that, but they definitely, getting off that slow start is really concerning. And I think you're right. Sydney's better built to kind of gradually build and stage a big comeback like that. And like you said, the Pies were just a little too gassed at the end. They didn't really have the horses to kind of finish the job. But yeah, there's some concerns with the Swans. I mean, like if the finals were today and they played like a Frio or a Hawthorn or a team like that, they could have be in a real track meet. So
Hmm.
I think the Swans, they're going to regroup. They're going to get under the hood and fix it, and they'll
Yep.
be fine long term. But yeah, that was a little too blood pressure raising for Coxie there. I think they've got some things to work on. They'll get back to the drawing board and try to get a good run of form. You mentioned Mal Rosas. I think he's got a contention for maybe being one of the best free agent pickups of the
Yep.
offseason. I
100%.
I think
He
he was kind of lost in the shuffle with the Gold Coast. He showed plenty of flashes, but he
mhm.
wasn't really consistently in the starting line, right? So I reckon him getting a fresh start with the Swannies was huge. He's a kid that you can kind of play him forward pocket, you can play him at forward flank. He can do a lot of different things, and he's just quick on his feet. He's
Mhm.
efficient with the footy. He's a guy who can get the fans on their feet. So
Mhm.
he's been very exciting to watch. And I think as long as he's healthy, he'll be in that starting 23.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Now he's brought something. Tommy Papley has a little bit of it, but
Mm.
Nobody on the Swans roster has his flair and his ability to just kind of squeak through small spaces sometimes. I mean, yeah, I know he kicked seven in that one game, which was absolutely fantastic. But the one
Yes.
thing that I've been happy with him is that he hasn't been a huge possession guy, but the possessions that he does have are quality. He was a little not so much as good this week again this round against Collingwood. There were a couple of kicks. I think he'll probably during the review go, what was I thinking? But I mean, he's been fantastic. Kerno's and Jai
Yeah.
Sarong. All three of the three Swans bring-ins have been absolutely fantastic. I think Jai Sarong also, just like Malcolm Roses, is going to be one of those that they won't talk about him because they didn't get the big press coverage like Charlie.
Mm.
But the impact that Jai Sarong and Malcolm Roses Jr. have both had on this team, I think, have been fantastic. And the scary part to think about it is that the one and only loss that they had was to Hawthorn, and Isaac Heaney and Errol Goulden were both hurt in that game. Goulden has been hurt since round three, and they're still winning games of footy. So I
Yeah.
almost appreciate the Swans not doing what they did in 2024, where they zoomed out playing their best footy in June, and I kept saying the entire time, going, I don't like it because we're peaking too early, and that's exactly what happened. So I kind of like these tough games where we don't play as well because you're gonna learn despite getting the win, you're still gonna learn, which is
Sure.
absolutely fantastic.
And as a coach yourself, you know that as well as anyone.
Yep, yep. Sometimes you have to find ways to still, and I think Coxie is capitalizing on it because you're seeing it a little bit. This ability that even Nick Blakey in the interview, he's like, we haven't played really good footy the last couple of weeks, and we're still finding ways to win. He goes, we're happy, but we're not happy, which I appreciate. And the Lizard,
Yeah.
how fantastic was he in this game? 39 disposals. Absolutely love seeing him absolutely
Mm.
go nuts. And then the joke is that he had his shoulders taped up, and then somebody went, "What shoulders?" Which
Yeah.
just absolutely made me chuckle. So let's head on up to Darwin, up at TIO Stadium, where the Suns again continue this streak of wins up in Darwin as they get a win over Port Adelaide, 98-73. I mean, it's Suns footy up in Darwin. I mean, if it weren't for the fact they're called the Gold Coast Suns, damn it, moving up to Darwin because you just can't beat them up in Darwin.
Boy, it's the streak is incredible, 10 straight. And I mean, and every almost every game is a sellout up there. You know, when I was in Australia, I spent a few months up in Darwin. TIO Stadium is a really nice little venue
Yep.
up in Darwin. It's right by the airport. And whenever the footy's in town, you know, it's at least 10,000, 12,000. You know, indigenous communities up in the territory really get around footy up there. So yeah, it's always fun, you know, to coincide during Indigenous round. But yeah, the Suns have been fantastic up there. I think, you know, again, great crowd numbers. The Suns are well suited to the conditions because they have a humid preseason in Queensland. Darwin, of course, 28 Celsius for most of the game. It was definitely, you know, that they were able to put their foot on the gas and just run Port Adelaide off. Unfortunately, they did cop a couple of injuries. Lockie Weller and Will Graham. I'm sure they're going to be a little bit. I don't think they've been ruled out for this week, but they'll be limited. I think it doesn't look like anything super serious. But Rowell's back. He had an ankle problem. Matty Rowell's back. He definitely is looking much more like himself. Noah Anderson, 33 touches. Casual day at the office for him. I think one guy who's kind of gotten overlooked amidst, you know, the Suns are known for their tall kids, you know, like Ben King is obviously their full forward. Jed Walter had a few goals. He's really started to find some good form. He's kind of a poor man's Charlie Curnow in terms of like the way
Mhm.
he's built, his overhead, you know, contesting mark ability. I think he's a kid that's really developed well. John Noble is, you know, having a real career renaissance up at the Suns. He might even push for All Australian because he's having a great impact there in their backline. But Ned Moyle is the guy I think who's a bit overlooked. He had 3 goals on the weekend. He's a guy who can sometimes play rock. Obviously, Gerard Wicks is getting a bit older. Moyle could be the heir apparent there, maybe. But he's been a kid who can move forward and kick some goals, and he's a physical guy, big target, a kid who can really be aggressive in the market contest. So he's a kid who I think has been really good. As far as the Power go, I mean, we know they're in rebuild mode. In terms of bright spots, Ewan McKinley had a nice little goal. He's a young kid that I know they're kind of excited about there with the Power. Not a great night for Georgiadis. I like him historically, but not his night. One goal, three. Again, Power just couldn't play the conditions up in Darwin. That's a tough road trip. But no, I think the Power still need some time to really establish their identity under the new coaching regime there. So yeah, they're still kind of stuck in neutral because they just don't have the athletes to really run out games, let alone run
Mhm.
out games in the top end when it's superhuman.
Yeah, definitely, definitely being in the southern part of the country, you could definitely tell it was not something they were used to. Definitely, for sure. Let's move on to one of the other shockers, and it's just more of the margin for me. I still thought Adelaide would win this game. It's the margin that shocks me.
Ooh,
As the Adelaide Crows get a win over North Melbourne, 133 to 65, a 68-point win. And as we were saying off mic, this North Melbourne team is one of those 3 steps forward with a cracking game against Sydney and then 8 steps back in this absolutely atrocious performance at the Adelaide Oval where I kept hearing this being talked about so much. The fact that North Melbourne has never won a game at the Adelaide Oval. Zip and 10.
I always
Holy
forget that.
shnikes. Yeah, I
Yeah,
kept seeing that stat and it's absolutely insane that that stat is there. But I mean, it's frustrating now. It's very, very frustrating because you see the talent that's on this North Melbourne roster, and it's starting to make me go, is Alistair Clarkson not the coaching genius that we thought he was? Was he lucky to get the talent that he did at the right time at Hawthorn now? Was he more of a beneficial of talent than he was the coaching genius that everybody thought he was? Because if he was the coaching genius that everybody said he was, why is it North a finals contender or a grand final contender with some of the incredible talent that they have in the coffers at North Melbourne?
yeah. I mean, I don't really like this phrase historically. It's like they should be past this, right? In
Yep.
terms of the rebuilding project. I don't think that's the right perspective in terms of like, hey, anyone can blow out your team if you just are lethargic in the first quarter or the second quarter. That second quarter was an actual embarrassment. Adelaide had what, 10 goals?
Mhm.
Absolutely astonishing. And boy, I mean, you're right. It's so frustrating in terms of like, you can see the improvement week to week. They're clearly more competitive. I was grabbing my phone just now because I screenshotted this. It was a statistic that I saw on Facebook, Fox Footy, 7-year ruse first. This was when they were revealing the latest fixture, right? The next section of games. North Melbourne entered the season coming off 6 consecutive bottom three finishes. They had won just 20 of their 130 games this decade. 9 games later, it's clear that the Roos have taken a step forward, and their rise has been rewarded by the AFL in the latest fixture release, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they're not going to be bottom four this year for the first time in forever. But the problem is, if they're not bottom four, what are they? They're clearly not ready for finals. They're clearly not bottom four, or they don't look like they're bottom four most weeks. But this was an embarrassment. And I mean, like, you can see that their young kids are maturing. Again, as a coach, you understand this in terms of like, you hear about the young kids once they hit that 50 game mark to the 100 game mark. That's where you see the most dramatic incremental improvements, the 50 game mark to the 100 game mark, in terms of that's how you develop kids the best. And they should be hitting their stride within that gap, really. Ideally, before you hit 50 games, if you're a real superstar. But hey, 50 to 100, that should be right when you're hitting your prime, putting consistent games of senior footy. The
Yep.
Roos have plenty of kids like that. We know these guys. They're not that they're household names. They're not unknowns. We know She's. We know Davies Uniacke. He got injured at the very end. Looked like possibly a scary knee injury, but he did get off after a few seconds at the final buzzer. I mean, it's just so frustrating for the Roos. I mean, and some of these things have been self-inflicted, like Sherry getting himself suspended for a stupid incident. Other situations where just they failed to capitalize on that momentum, string together, a run of wins. Now, at the same time, if they can actually start fast tracking that development in that 50 to 100 game window,
Mhm.
maybe they can spoil someone's season down a stretch. But finals, forget about it. They clearly aren't ready. Maybe next year, but and again, you could see Clarko is finally getting some return on investment. But it's like, again, they should be past this. I hate to say it, like I said, but they should be past games like this.
Mhm.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, this is another frustrating one because I've been a believer of this North Melbourne team, and it's very frustrating when it's like you don't I understand this performance once in a while, but when it happens multiple times in a season in a year, that honestly this is a perfect season to make finals because you've
Yeah.
got teams like Richmond, Essendon, Carlton that are absolutely crapping the bed right now. I mean, let's just be honest. So I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be a bottom four side, but the reason they're not going to be a bottom four side is because there's other teams that just are not very good. There is a clear delineation between the top 10 and the bottom eight. And the question will be is how big is the gap? Like, could
Yes.
this be a year where we get to round 22 and we already really pretty much know the teams that are going to play finals? We just won't know what position they're at. Where it's like you look at it, it's like we're pretty sure that Richmond, Essendon, Carlton, are probably going to be in the bottom four, maybe even West Coast. We'll have to see. Again, West Coast is an enigma because they're kind of like what I was kind of hoping North Melbourne would be is that really competitive in several games. Maybe they take a beating sometimes when a good team catches them at just the right time, but are super competitive in most games. They've been that, but then this game really just absolutely is a face plant, and that's very, very frustrating. So let's move to one of the teams that I think a lot of people at the start of the season talked about being a bottom six side, but could be the love story of this season as the Melbourne Demons, get a win over Hawthorn 120-81. I know no Tom Barras, but how much fun is this D's team to watch? Their excitement machines. The Pickets are absolutely so much fun to watch. Max Gone is Max Gone of old. It is so good to see Max capitalizing on these new
Mm.
rule changes. Man, how much fun is this D's team to watch?
Yes. Boy, I mean, Stephen King is clearly the man for the job. I mean, I think that was a situation where, I mean, say what you will about Melbourne at the very top. I mean, I know they had their CEO resign unexpectedly. There's been some uncertainty there. Stephen King, I mean, he's a respected assistant coach. I mean, I think, a lot of people like that hire. But in terms of immediate success, I mean, and
Nobody expected it.
it's incredible in terms of like, yeah, no, I think clearly a great hire. Apart from the loss to Essendon, which makes less and less sense the more you think
Exactly,
about
right?
it. Apart from that, they've only lost to Sydney and Frida. They're 7-3 right now. The D's
And
are
both they were
clearly
competitive in. It's not like
right.
they got destroyed. Both were competitive. The Swans game was an absolute shootout. And it was so much so they've been competitive. So it's been
Definitely.
fantastic to see them. And the scary part is too is to think about is they trade Petraka and Oliver over the offseason, which I think kind of assisted in everybody saying they'd be a bottom six side. I mean, they're looking at could being a top six side, flirting with top four if a Geelong falls apart or a Hawthorn or a Fremantle or a Sydney start to have injury trouble middle of the season. Melbourne's going to be right there. I mean, they are absolutely playing some fantastic football. Again, it's still earlier in the year.
Yeah,
Could coaches figure out Stephen King's style? Could it change? Again, I don't want to put a pin in the balloon. I really don't. But
sure.
it is still early. But man, are they so much fun to watch. I mean, I know they gave me a heart attack when they played Sydney in the shootout game that was. But man, that was a fun game of football. If you enjoy offense and you enjoy some absolutely electric skill,
Mm.
was the game for you to watch.
Oh hell yeah! I mean, I like the D's in terms of like you're right. Obviously, Kazi Pickett, Max Gawn, taking upon themselves like leadership roles. Like I don't know if you saw the Amazon Prime documentary
A
about
little bit
footy
of it,
where
yeah.
it featured Golan quite a bit, of course. And excuse me, he was saying like, he'd be lying if he thought about if he hadn't thought about retirement, but his kids love watching him play. He's still up for it. He's still dominating. Golan and Pickett. Obviously, Petraka left. There were some unknowns there. Stephen May retired. You've got to give a lot of credit to Golan and Causey for keeping the group united. And I think the issue with Simon Goodwin, it wasn't just boring footy. Let's be honest. It was a lack of the youth development. And there clearly is a much better results there under Kingy's leadership because they're overachieving in a rebuild year. Like you said, don't want to be too presumptuous. It's hard to say what their floor is and what their ceiling is, right?
Hmm.
But they should definitely make finals given the current state of the competition. They need to win on the road. They haven't won any games on the road, even though they're great at MCG. But of course, it matters come September if you win at MCG. Another thing that's worth mentioning with the D's, um, 68,000 fans. That's a really good attendance. Now, I'm
Yep.
sure plenty of Hawthorne fans there too, but of course, the D's do kind of have the reputation of having fair weather fans or,
Yep.
the pretentious private school kids in Melbourne are D's fans. Like their fan base definitely cops them for, not being
Hmm.
as hardcore as some other teams. So can they change the narrative there in terms of like, hey, this rebuild is ahead of schedule. Let's get on the bandwagon. Let's really get around the D's and see if we can really push for a few upsets down the stretch and try to come into September with some momentum because they clearly look really hot right now. And I think they're really damaging in a lot of ways. They pressure well. They're pretty good from stoppages. They kick fairly accurately. I mean, like there's still some questions with their depth, but for the most part, and they've got Jack Viney coming back from injury soon. He had that Achilles, if I'm not mistaken. So
The latest reports I'm
hopefully,
hearing,
oh,
they may not get him back this year.
really,
They're still not sure. That yeah, there's some of the reports that I'm hearing, they're not sure if they'll get him back this year or not. I hope so because he'd be
yeah,
a heck of an addition. But
I mean,
you're seeing the emergence of their young first, Langfors, Tholstrup,
mm,
Rivers, a lot of this young talent that was kind of being held back because of Petrarch and Oliver. I mean, how do you kick them out of the midfield? I fully get it. But
sure,
them moving on and might have actually opened up the corridor and opened up the middle of the field for Keziah Pickett to become what he has been, what he kind of really started doing last year and has really showed a lot this year. You're seeing Tholstrup go through the middle. You're seeing Langford go through the middle. Jack Steele coming over from St. Kilda, still wondering why St. Kilda got rid of him because that's what St. Kilda is missing right now is that guttural midfielder that's just going to put his head over the footy, get the ball out to the speedsters. So it's kind of interesting that they let him go, and he's absolutely
mm,
excelled over at Melbourne, which is absolutely fantastic. But I don't want to not talk about Hawthorne because again, I never want to say one player is going to affect him, but Tommy Barras's absence was noticeable because it does kind of it affects a lot of things because it most likely it shifts defensive structure around. It takes Sicily. I think it really kind of handcuffs Sicily because now Sicily has to be a key defender instead of being that loose intercept defender with his kicking
right,
ability to kind of start their rebound because they've got such pace through the midfield. They don't have a big midfield. I mean, after Jai Newcomb, they're relatively a mosquito fleet, if you really think about it. So
yeah,
they want to be not in contest. They want to be in space. They want to run. They want to get out and go. And that's what Sicily's really good at doing. But now that Sicily's got to be a key defender with no Barras, it has hamstrung them a little bit. So it'll be fascinating to see how does Hawthorne play this injury out of Tom Barras because when he does come back again, Barras is a great stopper, one of the best fullbacks in the competition. You stick him
right,
on one of the key forwards, and usually that key forward does not have a good day. So it's frustrating a little bit because this Hawthorne team again they Jekyll and Hyde us a little bit. They show brilliancies in games. And then like Collingwood, where they get a draw, honestly, that was frustrating because they should have won that if they could just kick straight, and they didn't. And
mm,
this is another one where talent wise, they should be superior. but they didn't. And again, no
Right.
Gunston, no Barras. I know those are huge misses. But again, Gunston is towards the end of his career. He shouldn't make that big an impact. You've got Mitch Lewis, you've got Cal Shadir, you've got Nick Watson, who's been absolutely fantastic. You've got Jack Ginnivan, who I think really has excelled since he's put on that brown and gold Guernsey. He's really excelled at Hawthorn. He's been fantastic for them. But
Yeah.
this is a frustrating one for me because honestly, on paper, Hawthorne, even since Barras and Gunston, probably should have won this game. So this is frustrating as a
Yeah.
Hawk supporter. This is probably a loss that's you're gonna rue a little bit because now it puts a bigger gap between you and Fremantle and Sydney at the top of the ladder. Let's go to it.
Yeah.
We got to talk about the new coach bump as Michael Voss resigns on Monday of this week, and Carlton goes, well, we got to have a new coach bump. And Kripke has another one of those new coach great games as he leads his Carlton Blues to an upset win over, again, I know this is a depleted, injury riddled Doggies team, but again, just like the Hawks, talent wise, the Doggies still have more talent on the field than Carlton does when it comes to it. Let's just be honest. So a
Yeah.
12-point loss by Western Bulldogs. This is an absolute killer for the Western Bulldogs' chances at top four now, and really
Yeah.
pushes them to the point where, I mean, they're in a hole it's going to be difficult to dig out of. Great to see Carlton get a win. That's great. But again, this season is already shot.
Yeah. I mean, like you kind of figured it was inevitable that A, Vossi would resign, and B, that they would win the game immediately after. You know, it just, yeah, in terms of like they were overdue given how many they had choked, and they were finally able to play some consistent quarters together. Now, granted, Josh Fraser's already ruled out. You know, he's the caretaker coach. He's ruled out taking the full time gig. We'll see who they interview. Obviously, it's a hot job. Cripps had a great game. You know, it was great that he finally looked like his old self. You're right. The doggies have been crushed with injuries. There's clearly too much on Bonampelli's shoulders. Tim English had the ACL. That's brutal. Rory Lobb has not been in form. They've had a bunch of players who haven't been in form as well. And there's clearly too much on Bonampelli's shoulders. A team that talented.
And he's sore as all get out. I mean, he's basically barely training and just playing in the games, and you can
Yeah.
tell he's sore. And I worry that I really that they're beating him up way too early in the season. And when they do get healthy, are you going to have a beat up Bontempelli going into that stretch run when you're really going to need an electric talent like him?
Yeah, I mean it's some rough sledding. They've really kind of hamstrung themselves, haven't they?
Mhm.
It's been tough, and now Liberatore is also out. You know, with his history of concussions, he might need to retire early. Riley Garcia's been out. It's just like everywhere you look, there's bodies piling up, and it's just you want to give Beveridge a mulligan, but given how fast they started and the way, I mean, they've gone from first on the ladder to 10th in
Mhm.
shocking fashion. And it's just their percentage is terrible. I mean, what more can you say? You do want to give Bevo a mulligan, you do,
Yep.
but boy, I mean, a team that talented should and that well coached should have more depth, and they don't. And I think there's a lot of issues there. So, lots of warning signs for the doggies. You know, when they're healthy, they're as good as anyone. But that's a moot point right now, isn't it?
Yep, definitely for sure. So I'm gonna do this. I don't normally do this, but I want to do this just because it'll help us out a little bit.
Sure.
Because I don't really want to talk about the next two games too much. Is plain and simply, Wyalup beat Fremantle, beat Essendon, Wyalup, as they're known for the Mongert ground, 104-61, 43-point win. St. Kilda beat Richmond 109-73. I mean, both these games are relatively similar. You have two of the not so great teams in the competition getting beat up by two teams that both played really, really well. I also look at it as a little bit too. Fremantle probably should have won this one more. They really took their foot off the gas in this one. Essendon, they're given some fight, but this is just they were far outmatched talent wise. I mean, Luke Jackson was absolutely magnificent again. This is a Fremantle team again. They are building and they are building very, very well. I know their percentage isn't as fancy as Sydney is, but they're playing some absolutely magnificent football. It is so much fun. St. Kilda, you face the injury ward that is Richmond. You absolutely pound them. You need to start doing this more consistently, especially with the players that you've brought in, the talent that you have for this game. St. Kilda should be a team fighting for top six,
Yeah.
maybe even flirting with a top four. Probably not, but at least be in a top six side. And they're continuing to find ways to disappoint us. But like for both of these, again, Wyalup, St. Kilda, great. Richmond, Essendon, not so much. Like I really don't want to waste a lot of time on that one because we got to talk about this last one. And this is not me putting the boot into my co-host here because as the Giants fan he is, but this was a stunner. Like I will
Yeah.
admit, I fell asleep in this one, so I watched this game the next day and was stunned at
Yeah.
the game that I saw as the West Coast Eagles, Wailea Marwa, get a win 88-71 over the GWS Giants. As the Giants fans as you are, how frustrating is this? Because this is a Giants team again, on
Yeah.
paper, very, very good. But as you said off mic, to start the year, you lose Tom Green to an ACL, and Sam Taylor still has not done a Giants Guernsey this entire season.
Oh yeah, it's been a brutal year for injuries from the jump. It's also been brutal in terms of just inefficiency with the footy, in terms of our best players, in terms of goal kicking ability. Of course, you got your Toby Green, you've got your Jesse Hogan up front, and Jake Stringer. Stringer's actually had a surprisingly good year when he's been in the side, but it's in terms of the role they've been asking him to play. But boy, it's been frustrating. Green and Hogan have not been kicking accurately by their lofty standards.
Hmm.
Everything has just felt out of sync all year, and we were vulnerable to a team like West Coast that. And that they had a chance to win back-to-back games this next week. They haven't done that since round 2 and round 3. I still don't think the Eagles are there yet. They've got, like you were saying, they're still kind of behind North in terms of like they should be further ahead than they are. They're still, I feel like West Coast, the biggest issue with them, and hey, they played very well. They really did have an excellent fourth quarter. They kept going and they kept building. And Harley Reid did what Harley Reid does. Give full credit to them. I think the biggest issue with West Coast, they do still have 100 plus point losses. They still haven't won back-to-back games since round 2, round 3. The biggest issue, I think, with the Eagles, and again, credit to them for the progress they've made, but they're too Reed and Dursma focused. And it's tempting when you've got 2 top 5 picks who are as freaking gifted as those guys are. Reed and Dursma are just ball mounts. We know this. We've
Hmm.
seen. But the rest of the side, Tim Kelly's been okay. They've had, a few. Jake Waterman's been inconsistent. Guys
Elliot Yo, now that he's healthy, is starting to look like
finally
Elliot
healthy.
Yo of the
Yeah,
past, which is
that's
fantastic to
good.
see that he's getting a run with few injuries. I know he missed a couple of games there for a bit, but when he has played, he has looked good. But Cooper Duff Tyler didn't play in this game, but I think he's another one of those that's in that Luke
Sure.
Jackson, the Brody Grundys, the super athletic midfield-ish rucks that they're slowly weaning him into the games when he has played. He's shown flashes of brilliance again. A top level guy that I think eventually is going to be one of the better rucks in the competition for sure. And
Yeah,
William Dersma has shown that West Coast getting top picks and actually getting quality players to put around Harley Reid, you're starting to see that talent play out. You're starting to see that development again. I what McWalter is doing, he's trying his best with what he was
sure.
given. Again,
Yeah,
it's a little bit of hindsight's 2020. They held on to that 2018 grand final and did not let it go, and that really it killed them. And the Tim Kelly trade still to this day it haunts them because of so many first round picks that they did not have
right.
because they shifted it off for a good midfielder that has not really progressed in West Coast Eagles colors.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, they've still got a long way to go, but if they can finally start getting some consistent footy and stringing some wins together. They've got an opportunity maybe against Collingwood. Again, it's Pendles' landmark game. I don't think that even as banged up as the Pies are, I don't think they're gonna. We'll talk about the upcoming round soon, obviously, but I still don't have confidence that the Eagles can definitely get across the line against a Pie side that's going to be extra motivated. So we'll see. I think, as an Eagles fan, give them credit. They always show up, win or lose. It's good for them to see some solid footy and to see a promising future under McWalter. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's
let's see what else they can do down the stretch.
it's definitely going to be fun. I mean, I will chuckle like like an evil superhero in a Batman comic if West Coast find a way to knock off Collingwood and Pendlebury's thing, because I know like we said, if a yank on the footy has his way, West Coast will absolutely stun Collingwood and
Oh,
however
we,
many
we know who
people.
he's tipping. We know who
He's
you're tipping, Craig.
he said in that rant he isn't tipping Collingwood the rest of the year, and I absolutely,
Oh
amen,
yeah,
brother. Absolutely love it again. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I
right.
absolutely loved it again. For any of you that haven't heard it, if you want an epic rant about calling, if you are not a Collingwood fan, again, for the Collingwood supporters that do listen to this, again, I'm not trying to bash your club, but it was, if you are not a Collingwood supporter, you got to give it'll listen, because he absolutely goes on a rant, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So huge shout out to Yank on the footy on that one. So we'll jump to the burning questions, and for the first time, I had a suggestion thrown at me for burning questions by my co-host here, and I actually love the topic because with Tasmania jumping into the VFL and being a very soon to be 19th club, there's been constant talk about a 20th side and where it should be. And Rick, I know you wanted to bring it up, the fact that, I mean, there's a heavy look at Darwin and at the Northern Territories about this. And again, I hear the arguments is there enough people, yada yada yada. But honestly, if the AFL can subsidize so many of these clubs, damn it, I wouldn't mind them subsidizing these clubs, because if you get jobs up in at Darwin or in Alice Springs, I don't care. Get somewhere where you can do some good in the community. I think it'd be nothing but fantastic. But just, I know you wanted to talk about this. I mean, the 20th team, like, I love the idea, because I think it'd be absolutely fantastic to get Darwin or the Northern Territory a team, because how awesome would that be for the competition to have that representation in an area that has produced a lot of great footballers?
Right. No, yeah, I'm very happy to talk about this. You're right in terms of there's a pathway, and we know it would be difficult. Tassie, obviously, there's been a lot of discussions about the stadium. They're starting off in the VFL. Early results are promising. Early attendance figures are promising for a territory team. What I heard, and for the record, NT Football with Jackson Clark is a great Facebook page. He's a footballer up in Darwin. He does local media up there as well. He's posted about it quite a bit on social media. But yeah, the long story short is that 2032 would be the target date. They have started a task force for the territory. One of the main guys involved is the AFL NT, AFL Northern Territory CEO Sean Bowden, I believe his name is. Andrew Demetriou, former AFL CEO, as many people know. He's given a seal of approval to the idea. I believe he'll be involved. I'm sure they'd love to get someone like Cyril Rioli or like Stephen Motloff. You're right. There are so many great footballers who come from that part of Australia. Darwin's the only city in the country where they play footy year round. And of course, because of the summer weather up there, and they have to switch to cricket and footy season. So they play when the rest of Australia is playing in cricket. And, lots of Indigenous kids play really good level league footy over there. You got players coming from interstate leagues who play down south in the winter. They go to Darwin for the summer. The appetite is there. Now,
Hmm.
the obstacles, Darwin is tiny. I lived there for 4 months. It's barely 250,000 people in the metro area, if that.
Hmm.
TIO Stadium only seats 10,000. The humid weather being a concern. There's, lack of corporate sponsorship, maybe. stadium expansions. We know the challenges kind of in terms of like as footy fans, Darwin has crazy potential, but the obstacles seem insurmountable in terms of like, could you get young kids to really go there and stay there? You'd have to start a full time NT academy, focus on
Mhm.
getting Indigenous kids in
Yep.
Auskick and getting into rural communities.
Fully
In
agree.
terms of
Yep.
like, in terms of the weather, you could offset that, play 2 games a month in Darwin, play 2 games a month in Atlas, or do 3-1. There was the Northern Territory Thunder. They were a rep team, RIP.
Hmm.
They dissolved, I believe, back in 2018. They played in the old NEAFL. I'm sure you're
Yep. The
familiar with
Neefle.
them.
Yep.
So you could resurrect the Thunder name, just throwing that out there. There's a way to split it between Darwin and Alice. Have the team headquartered in Alice, or in Darwin, have players live in Darwin. Again, it would be a big challenge, but there's a way to do it if you kind of squint.
Hmm.
I think there's a way to, and again, they'll be able to see Tasmania's wins and losses on and off the field in real time, and be like, okay, here's what they did well. Here's what we can learn from them and improve.
Yep.
I think you have to have 20 teams at some point. Where it's going to be is the question. I've heard other people suggest like splitting a team between Darwin and Cairns. I think that would be even more challenging because Cairns is
Hmm.
in rugby league territory. There is AFL history there. They've played games there in the past, but Darwin, again, given the
Yep.
history that the Suns have, and hey, the Suns still have to renew their license to play games in Darwin. I believe it's up next year. So
Hmm.
they're starting discussions, but that is something that's worth mentioning. So
Yep.
again, as Tassie enters the league, as we see, their successes and failures on and off the field, like I said, we'll be able to see, hey, the NT could maybe do it, but everyone's gonna have to step up. Everyone.
Hmm.
I think we'll see how it goes. You've got to get the right people involved. Like Tassie was
Yep.
smart. They got Jack Reevil. They got what's his name, the old Richmond CEO, Gale, Brendan
Yep.
Gale. They got a lot of smart people, not just people who are experienced in footy, people who are smart and people who are able to make the case to Tassie's population. Hey, this is long overdue. Tassies love footy. They barrack for other teams sometimes, but we need to be in the national competition. And
Yep.
that was something. The stadium was its own battle. That was a whole, political thing. But they got the right people on the board and getting the wheels turning in terms of like, hey, this doesn't have to be a dream. We can finally get this done. So I think the territory, it'd be very challenging. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely love it. My only other idea that I would have to maybe offset it would to be is try to crowdfund or find a way to fund a indoor or like Marvel Stadium type of stadium there because that's going to bring jobs to the area to build it in the first place. It's going to bring jobs to people to work it to keep up maintenance to everything like that. If you build it just right to where you can maybe have a retractable roof, you could play cricket up there. You could maybe potentially get a Big Bash team up there as well, which would be great because then you could still play it during the regular cricket season because all you got to do is shut the roof. I know Marvel Stadium plays sometimes with the roof shut when it comes to the Big Bash, so it's not like it's not something that they could think of. So I love the idea. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The problem is there's so much naysayers about it because of the population, and I get it because these teams need to make money because so many of these teams are subsidized by the AFL because of the funding that they need. But my
Yeah,
thought is that again, there's more TV rights coming up soon, and if you have a 20th team in the right place, you can ask for more money in the TV rights. So it is
sure.
absolutely fantastic. And plus, as you said, if you could get a full-time NT Academy up there, you could definitely benefit. And I know, as we've said with Mongrel Ground, is there's the discussion of the mandatory at least one spot for an indigenous player, which would be helped if you have an NT Academy to where you have academy players in the area where a lot of Aboriginal players, a lot of Indigenous players are, and where you can develop them, you can train them, and you can get them to AFL standard. And that's
Yeah,
the biggest thing there because I
right.
agree, you do need more Aboriginal players and native born players when it comes to it because it only helps the game. Some of these young men are incredibly talented, and when they are at their best, they are some of the best in the competition, bar none. So, no, I 100% agree. I really do hope that they can find a way to do that. Darwin, Alice Springs, I don't care. Somewhere in the NT would be perfect because then every single state in Australia would have a AFL team to support. It would be incredible. So I'm 100% with you. We were going to talk about the gap between second and third, but I'm going to skip it purely because again, we're still early in the season. Again, I think this ladder is going to fluctuate a little bit.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
always love asking this question, and I'm going to ask this question again next week too. The
Okay.
Mongrel jersey for me is fantastic. I love all of these jerseys. So I want you to do this, and I'm going to do the same thing. Take away the Giants for you, take away the Swans for you. What is your favorite Guernsey so far that you have seen Mongrel that does not involve your Giants, and I will not involve the Swans?
Hmm. I really dug. I was going to say Frio. I'd say it might be a toss up between them and Port because there was something about Port Adelaide, the way they highlighted the teal and kind of incorporated that into the design of the Guernsey in a way that was, it kind of looked fresh and original in terms of like just the patterns, the kind of texture of it. You know, it's supposed to look like a painting because there's so, I don't know all of them, obviously, but there's so many different styles of like indigenous paintings, you know? So like they all kind of look, you know, three-dimensional in that way in terms of like, oh, you can see kind of the patterns and the shapes. And then of course there's always a story behind it, which is kind of cool. And you know, sometimes it ties into the people themselves, sometimes it ties into the club or the club's history. Sometimes it's just about like resilience or tenacity, which are, you know, things that footy players have to have. So the stories behind them are always kind of creative. As we were talking about off air, you know, like they almost always get like, you know, a local elder, a local artist, and then like an indigenous player to kind of collaborate on a design and then kind of unveil it as part of the round. So it is kind of a cool tradition that they've embraced, and it's unique. It's definitely something that's footy specific. I have a indigenous Caroline Springs jersey that my buddy Dre got for me a few years ago when he was
Hmm.
visiting Australia, and it's a cool design itself. So
Well,
yeah, catching on in local leagues, it's a cool little way to highlight the contribution that they've made to the game over the years, and also how it, you know, there's that they're still at it today, and they're you know, well represented in, you know, again, there's been discussion in the AFL. It's kind of gone down in recent years, the number of indigenous kids, but at the same time, there's still plenty of stars who are paving the way for the next generation. You mentioned the Pickets. You know, how cool is that that they can
mhm.
play in the same side together? And you know, there's a lot of kids who are writing their own stories every round and representing their communities well. So it's good to see. I think you know, there's it'll take time in terms of getting the number back to where the AFL wants it. But you know, I think it'll happen organically in terms of like you've got next generation academies for you know the teams like besides the Swans, the Giants. You know, as you know, like the Victorian teams have MGA academies. I think Collingwood does like a lot of rural communities in the territory currently, and a few other sides recruit up there as well. But yeah, there do need to be more pathways. I know Eddie Betts and his foundation, they do a great job in terms of just outreaching to these kids who got talent, but they just might not have a family support. They might not have a secure financial situation. They just might need that extra help to be like, hey, you know, like we just, if you just want to have coffee, we're here. If you want to
Mhm.
come over for dinner, let us know. You know, Eddie Betts has done a great job in terms of like mentoring kids like Tyson Stengel. He was talking recently about reaching out to Bobby Hill. Obviously, Bobby Hill, phenomenal player. He's had some challenges. Some of those are private. We don't want to speculate, but
Mhm.
he's a guy who's had some challenges on and off field. And you know, Betts was saying, "Hey, I'll reach to him. You know, I want to be a mentor to some of the indigenous kids that are coming through the AFL system." And that gives me optimism in terms of like I hear what they're saying in terms of they want, you know, the spot for an indigenous player. They want to include that on lists. that sounds great, but I think it'll happen organic. I think positive signs that there's going to be more kids coming through in the future. So fingers crossed that continues, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, they've made some great contributions to the game over the years. So
Mhm.
Indigenous round is fun.
Yeah, no, Fremantle, I love the use of the anchor
Mm,
along with all of the indigenous art is absolutely fantastic. Love theirs. Adelaide is always one of my favorites too because of the use of the crow, because it is a very connected with many of the tribes in South Australia. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. Again, there's not a bad one. Like I literally was just pulling up, looking at several of them too, because I wanted to double check on a couple of them, and just again,
sure.
the detail is absolutely magnificent. And I know anybody that looks at my YouTube always knows that I always keep my Black Swan one that I had sent to me from Orange in New South Wales, another Swans fan who said, and that is one of my favorite Guernseys because of the story of the Black Swan that I've actually heard the artist tell the story, and it was such a great story. Such
Well,
a
it's a good movie too. So
yep. No. I love it. No, so, no, I absolutely, the Mongrel round is absolutely fantastic. I have an Aboriginal, I have also have a indigenous round footy that I purchased a few years ago that I absolutely
nice.
adore. I love that. I can always keep that in my background. I always have it right there. I really should put it over instead of my
I see
Roosters
it.
one that
Yeah.
I have, but yeah, so I have it there for the people that can look at it. There it is, the yellow one there in the top right corner of your screen here that are watching the YouTube video. I absolutely adore those. Those are two of my favorites because I love what they do to connect to the First Nations of Australia. It's absolutely fantastic. So we always end burning questions with a question about my co-host team. So and again, he knows me. I rib him enough because again, it's just like producer Ross. The Swannies Giants rivalry is fun, but for me, it's one of those. I adore the Giants. I love what they're doing. Again, I don't want them to leave New South Wales. I know that there's talk of changing the name and all that crap. I really don't want to go into that particular part because I think that is administration. That's not on the footy field. So for you, sir, I mean, are you a little bit worried that the Giants' chances of finals are slimming round by round with some of these lackluster performances?
I am. No, I'm not gonna lie, full stop. I am worried. I think again, injuries are injuries, you know, like the inefficiencies that we talked about earlier. It's been a rough year. Now, again, there's been a few positives. Clayton Oliver's been a good addition. Brent Daniels is finally healthy. There's still time to get it right. And again, with wild card round, if the Giants are healthy and winning some games down the stretch, maybe they could go into September with some momentum. It's a long season, but yeah, it's just been such a headache in terms of like I put them in the same category as St. Kilda in terms of like the return on investment just isn't there yet. In terms of the list looks great, the list is not the issue.
Mhm.
Coaching, good but not great. But just like no consistency and just underachieving. So I think Saints and Giants, you can kind of pencil them in maybe for that 8 or 9 spot where they're a borderline finals team to begin with. Wild card weekend could go either way. Right now, we just need to get healthy and get more percentage. That's the best way to do it. I mean, we've got a challenging set of games up next: Brisbane, Melbourne. Hard to tell who's favored in with Brisbane. I think they'll be extra motivated after the loss to Geelong. I think they might take that one. But I think with the Demons, we could be, if we're healthier, we could win that one. We'll see. Obviously, Demons have struggled on the road. I think we're hosting that one. But yeah, no, it's just been a frustrating season. Like, I'm definitely concerned in terms of just like, there's just no momentum. There's no consistency. There's no, there's just not enough in terms of the grit. The Giants, obviously, you hear about the orange tsunami, never surrender. That's more than a slogan to me. I'm a genuine fan. I'm a member, like it's just frustrating to see. Sometimes they're just going through the motions, it seems. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's just the lack of any continuity week to week in terms of the starting 23 has just been all over the place. And it's just, some of the kids haven't developed as well as they should have. Briggs has been a little disappointing. Lucky he's been good for the most part, but he's just under too much pressure. They're
Hmm.
not, Sam Taylor is so crucial to the backline structure, and Ash has had to take on way more responsibility. And normally he rises to the occasion, but sometimes he's just going to buckle under the pressure. Whitfield too. Whitfield's a great disposal machine. He's got one of the best kicks in the side, but it's just week to week there's just no rhythm, and part of it is just the lack of continuity. So it's really hard to see them pushing for finals. But again, we know this is a team, if they're healthy and they can catch fire at any time, who knows? I mean, they could be looking like their old selves in a month's time if they're healthy. But again, it's
Hmm.
just things are just so anemic at times in terms
Hmm.
of like the inaccuracy in front of goal, the free kicks not going our way, just the footy is never bouncing our way. There's nothing more frustrating than when you're already battling, when you're already shorthanded, and you just don't have luck on your side. It's like, oh, great, we're losing the free kick count by 16. Of course we're going to lose. It's
Hmm.
like nothing is going our way anyway. And it's just so frustrating to see your team stagnant in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, there's time to get it right. There's time to get healthy. It's just, I mean, the fixture is could go either way at this point. So we need to stop playing down to our competition and actually win some damn games consecutive. That's
Yeah.
and get that percent back.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see if we can get if you can get Sam Taylor back if it starts to kind of build the way it goes because again there's so much talent on that Giants roster even since some of the injuries there's still some really good footballers there and I
Yeah.
think Clayton Oliver has come in and he's is he the Clayton Oliver of Melbourne days? No, I don't think so. He has regressed a little bit. Again, that is not a shot at Clayton. That is just again, Father Time is undefeated. The more years and the
And he's
more,
being used in a different role.
yep, that too. Yep.
It's a different system.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think with Lockie Ash is that Lockie Ash, Lockie Whitfield, they both are so similar and they're both very offensive that sometimes that they get exposed defensively if there's a bad turnover in a certain situation. They're not great defensive players. And again, it is not again not a shot at them, but that's just the truth is that because they're such great offensive players,
Yeah.
sometimes they are defensive, a little bit defensive liabilities. So a bad turnover in the corridor right there, they're not great enough to be able to lock down a person to be able to cut it off. So like I said, I cross my fingers, touch wood, and everything like that, that the Giants figure out some form because it's always good to see a good Giants team because again, there's so much talent on that team. And again, as a interstate squad, I love seeing the interstate teams win and the Melbourne teams get frustrated because the interstate teams are playing well. Again, I know it's weird, but I'll jump on that
No,
hill.
no,
I'll die on that
good
hill if I
stuff.
have to. So no, so much fun. So that is it for burning questions. We jump to a little section where I take over just the tiniest bit when it comes to it. We'll start off with team of the week. I'm interested on what you think of this here, Rick. So here we'll start off. I
Sure.
have the fullback line. I kind of squeezed him in here a little bit. So fullback line, Gold Coast, Bodie Hewlin, Adelaide's Josh Worrell, and St. Kilda's Cal Wilkie. Again, if Cal Wilkie does not get an All-Australian Blazer at the end of the year, damn it, it's a tragedy because this guy has been incredible for St. Kilda down in that back line. Again, you can definitely tell he is an anchor for this St. Kilda team. In the halfback line, with John Noble of the Gold Coast Sun, Port Adelaide's Kane Farrell, and the Lizard, Nick Blakey, round out the halfback line. Out on the wings, we have James Peatling of the Adelaide Crows and Matt Carroll of the Carlton Blues. In the center at Ruck, I'm going to give him a shout out. I know this is weird for some people. Bailey J. Williams of the West Coast Eagles. Wow, what an incredible performance by that young man there in the Rock, helping take over in the fourth quarter for the West Coast Eagles. Bailey Smith, Bailey Smith, Patrick Cripps, and Charlie Reed will be my three center gut midfielders. Some
Nice.
incredible performances by all three of those there. We go to the half forward line. Josh Rosselli of the Adelaide Crows, Joe Richards of the Port Adelaide Power, and Patrick Voss with 5 goals from Fremantle, including four in one quarter. How incredible was he in that game? On the full forward line, the man, the myth, the legend that was Sean Manna in this game, absolutely incredible with 5 goals himself. Aaron Naughton coming back after that scary neck injury that I thought
Oh,
he was gonna have in that Sydney Swans game. He's come back and played some great football. And then a great move by Stephen King, by Coach King and Harrison Petty of the Melbourne Demons going forward and kicking 3 goals. Got to give a shout out to the defender moving forward. On the bench, we have defender Joe Fonte kicking his first ever AFL goal. So got to give that young man a shout out there. A guy that you mentioned that I think I agree with you. I think he's the rock of the future at the Gold Coast Suns. Ned Moyle of the Gold Coast Suns will be my rock. On my midfielder is Dylan Moore of the Hawthorn Hawks. My forward, for some weird reason, I have Harrison Petty here twice. I'll have to double check that. Whoopsie, sorry about that. It was so nice I had to put him in twice. Sorry about that. And then my utility, I'll give a shout out. He was incredible for them. Nick Dacos of the Collingwood
hmm.
Magpies is my utility. I'll have to fix that. I can't remember who my other forward was. I won't worry about it right now. So that's my team of the week. I know really, really quickly, a lot of names there. Your thoughts on team of the week?
Oh, those are some really solid choices. I think Joe Richards is another Port Adelaide kid who's got a bright future. I think maybe next year they'll be able to kind of hit the ground running with the young kids they have and kind of build gradually towards when they can get back to September. I think yeah, there's definitely some kids there that can help them sooner rather than later. Dylan Moore, he's always consistent for Hawthorn. I think he's Hawthorn's another team that's very banged up. We didn't talk a ton about them, but he's a guy if he's he's going to be a guy who can rally the troops. So I like him. We mentioned Moyle. I think yeah, and yeah, Carroll and Carlton's win. Carlton finally wins a game and gets some consistent play out of that midfield. He's definitely a guy who can impact the footy if he's if he's fit. And yeah, no, I think there were definitely some picks I like there in the midfield in particular. So
Definitely
good
for
stuff.
sure. Yep. So we'll jump to the power rankings. This is always fun. Again, as I tell everybody, it is your 5 game form of your recent 5 games. So sometimes we get some squirrely ones, but for the most part, usually it is toward the top part of the ladder. We'll start off at 5, the Gold Coast Suns. At 4, the Adelaide Crows. At 3, the Geelong Cats. At 2, the Sydney Swans. And at 1, the Fremantle Dockers. So again, that 9 game win streak. That's the only reason Frio is ahead of Sydney on that is they have the longer win streak when it comes to it. So that is power rankings. Let's jump to it, sir. I know we're still early in the week, but we have some tipping to do and some cracking games in the second round of Mongrel round. Let's start off Thursday night footy. I've heard some complaints about this, but for me, I think this is actually good for the AFL. UTAS Stadium down in Launceston, down in Tasmania, sees the Hawthorn Hawks take on Curwana, the Adelaide Crows in this one. Intriguing match for me. I'm curious, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those games where the Hawks have a great record in Launceston. That's been a real fortress for them. It's very windy down there, and they can play that ground quite well. I think it's I always forget how it kind of looks, but the wings are pretty long, if I remember correctly. But yeah, no, the Hawks do have a great record in Tassie, but with their injury list and with the Crows coming off a massive win over North, I think they're going to be heading in there with quite a bit of confidence. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I'm going to tip the Crows there by 3 goals. How about yourself?
I'm gonna tip Hawthorn only because they play Tassie so well, no matter where they're playing.
Hmm.
So this was one of those. If this was at the Adelaide Oval, I'd tip Adelaide. But because this is at UTAS, because this is a Hawks home game, sometimes the Crows sometimes have struggled a little bit going on the road. So I'm gonna tip Hawthorn in this one. But This is a cracking Thursday night footy game again. I know some people are complaining, why isn't this game at the MCG? Why isn't this at Marvel? I love that it's at Launceston. I absolutely think it's fantastic because it tests these players a little bit. And until Tassie comes into the competition, the fact that Hawthorn and North Melbourne play games down in Tassie, I think is fantastic. So we'll move to it. One of the best games of the year, maybe not so much this year, is Dream Time at the G between Richmond and
Oh
Essendon. And this
boy,
one,
it's
I
how
don't want to tip this one.
how depressing is it that Dreamtime at the G is the wooden spoon game? Come on, guys. This is supposed to be fun. It's like, it's gonna be
This is
unwatchable.
I I don't want to call it unwatchable because again, for some weird reason, sometimes these games turn out intriguing. It may not be the greatest football to watch, but it's both teams are going to give it a crack. Both teams are looking at this opportunity as a chance to get a win in a season where wins are going to be hard to come by. I'm going to tip the Dons in this one because I think the Dons roster is healthier. I think they're just a little bit more consistent. And unless Richmond gets like half of their roster back, which I doubt is going to happen, I just think Essendon has too much firepower that is going to be able to play. But again, I'm hoping for an entertaining dream time at the G. I really am. But the problem is, it's probably the other game on Friday night that I'm probably going to want to watch because I worry. I agree with you. Is this going to be champagne footy? Probably not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm also going to tip the Dons by 2 goals. I think again, if you're really looking hard at like the incremental tiny improvements that the baby bombers, let's call them the baby bombers because that's what everyone's calling them in the media, Nate Caddy, Archie Roberts, we've seen some Isaac Cacao, we've seen some of these kids shine in limited time. It's just you all the losing shattering your confidence. That's the risk that you're running. That's what Brad Scott is staking his future on, essentially, in terms of like no matter how you spin it, this team is 1-23 in its last
Mhm.
24 games. Excuse me. And also, no matter how you spin it, Adam is 9-48 at Richmond. I mean, this is not good. Essendon had 25,000 in their last game against Frio. That was their lowest attendance. I think it was 33 years. It is dire. And Brad Scott was on AFL 360 the other day and saying, hey, these are the young kids that we're developing. It's not, it's not amazing footy right now, but this is the plan and we're sticking to it. He's gonna go down with the ship one way or another, but it's just been horrific. And Richmond, I mean, again, you can give them a mulligan because of all the injuries. I think Adam Uze is a good bloke. I think he has a plan for the future, but it's just brutal in terms of they have young talent that they just can't utilize. They're completely non-competitive, and it's just been a horrendous season so far. I think you just have to get rid of some of the veteran players who are passengers. Yes, that's Tom Lynch. Yes, that's Dion Prestia. Yes, maybe that's even Tim Taranto and some other guys. Like, fully commit to the rebuild, trade for some veterans who want to be there, guys who might be free agents this all season. Zach Butters is going to be under contract. Sam Walsh, Bailey Humphrey from the Gold Coast. There's Richmond there's free agents that Richmond can target that can kind of jumpstart the rebuild. How did Brisbane jumpstart their rebuild? They got Luke Hodge at the tail end of his career. Hodgie helped them rebuild and helped convince all those young kids to buy into what Fagan was selling. Similar thing, hopefully, is starting to happen at North. You do have Luke Parker up there. You do have Caleb Daniel up there. You've got veteran players that are trying to set the tone and help Farco build something that actually gains some traction long term. Essendon and Richmond just have to have their young kids buy in and be selective when free agency comes. Target guys that are dual impact players that actually want to be there and can help them actually play competitive footy. Because you can spin this as much as you want. it's still bad footy, and you have to start showing some signs of life at some point. It took a long time with North. It took a long time with West Coast. It still is. You really need to commit to a rebuilding process. Melbourne was smart. Melbourne understood. Again, it wasn't just about boring footy under Simon Goodwin. He won a flag. You can't be an idiot and win a flag in the AFL. It's not
Yeah.
freaking possible. But they knew that they couldn't string back-to-back flags. Their window was closed for the 2021 flag. They needed to take a leap of faith with Stephen King. So far, so good. Jury's still out long term. They still need to develop their young kids to be as good as they know they can be. But Richmond and Essendon are just bottoming out. They're where West Coast and North were a few years ago. So it's ugly. They need to figure out a plan. I'm tipping the Dons this week, but it's just unfortunate. Like, again, you worry about the psychological toll of that many losses on young kids who are talented, kids they want to convince to stay around. And it's just, you worry.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Like I said, I agree with you. It kind of dampens dream time at the G a little bit because of the fact of where
Yeah.
these two are at the ladder. But the Friday night footy does have a little bit of a helper as the other game on Friday night, which I think could be an absolute cracking game at an Optus Stadium out in Perth, as Wallulup Fremantle take on St. Kilda, and that this should be a cracking game. Curious, who do you like in this one?
Can we call this one the Ross Lyon Cup? I think St. Kilda, again, like I mentioned, comparing them to the Giants, I don't think the Saints, again, have enough return on investment given how they spent in the offseason. So if I'm Ross Lyon, I'm saying it's a good time to start a win streak. It's a good time to get more percentage. Unfortunately, they're taking the long road trip out to Perth against a Frio team that's the hottest team in Australia. So, boy, that's tough. I mean, I'm tipping the Dockers by 3 goals. I think it'll be good, but maybe by three-quarter time, the Dockers will be in control. I think again, the Saints can still challenge for September. They can still play meaningful footy down the stretch, but again, just no consistency with them. I think, and again, with Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera, he's going to try to come back, but he's got a hammy problem. We know that's tough, especially given how many kilometers he's running every game. So we need to see Wanganeen-Milera back. I don't either way. I don't see them beating Frio. So shout out to Frio. It's not just the win streak; it's the players who are putting their hands up. I loved what Justin Longmuir said a couple of weeks ago when he was asked, how do you view yourselves? And he's like, we don't have to prove anything to anybody. We're right where we need to be, and just having that confidence. He's had some games that he should have won over his first few years at Frio. Let's be honest, but they've developed their young kids really well. They've got some tall timber in the forward line. Jai Amos is a stud. Luke Jackson is just, you compare him to Max Gawn. He's just a unicorn in terms of
Mhm.
how physical he is, how they use him, and even having Mason Cox, he slowly built up form in the waffle. Obviously, Darcy's been injured. Coxie can come in and pinch hit in the rock and go forward if he has to, like he did with the Magpies. So I think Frio is really looking solid in terms of like everyone is playing their role. Michael Frederick, Isaiah Dudley, Switkowski. You've got so many kids who, again, they might not have been household names 3 years ago, but they've made a name for themselves, and I think they're relishing kind of the underdog role. Frio's never won a flag. They really want to push for that this year, and I mean, I think they can take care of business against St. Kilda if they, are consistent and play 4 quarters of footy. Don't get ahead of themselves. Just let Sarong and Brayshaw and that star-studded midfield do the work. I think Sarong's a shoe in for another All-Australian as well. I think the usual suspects are stepping up for them, but again, everyone's playing their own role. There's always you look at when they beat Hawthorn a couple of weeks ago when they had that run of like 7 straight goals, and it was one of those things where it was just like you could see the look in their eyes. They were like, we're not letting this one go. We know we're the better team in this matchup, and everyone's counting us out, but we're just gonna keep doing our thing and playing our style of footy. So the Dockers are in very good shape, and I think they're going to set the record and make it 10 straight.
Yep, I'm with you on this one, Fremantle. But this is for me, this is a measuring stick on St. Kilda's competitiveness
Sure,
because if Fremantle spanks them around, St. Kilda may make up the numbers in the 10 if they make finals. But if St. Kilda makes this a competitive game, keeps this within 2 or 3 goals for most of the game, and in it late in the fourth quarter, then maybe, just maybe, I might start leaning on St. Kilda to the point where I think they could be a top 8 side, a top 6 side potentially if things click. Again, no Naz, that hurts. That really does hurt. But Cal Wilkie's playing some incredible football, but they're going to need some help because, again, when you have that three-headed monster of Jai Amish, Josh Tracy, and Mason Cox when he's in there. In fact, I'll say this. Mason Cox basically to the point where when Sean Darcy's healthy, he's going back to the waffle. I don't think he's coming back to the AFL side because right now, Coxie is fitting perfectly in there, and he's that great bitch pitch hitter for Luke Jackson because right now Luke Jackson, Brody Grundy, and Max Gawn are fighting for those two for what could be two potential All-Australian spots for a ruckman this
that's
year.
right.
Two of the three are going to be there unless one of them absolutely loses form completely. I legitimately think two of the three are going to be in the All-Australian this year because all three have been playing incredible football. And I wouldn't shock me if Luke Jackson's actually the head rock, the starting rock in it, because he's been absolutely phenomenal this season. So I want to jump. Let's go to Marvel Stadium because this is one. I'm going to preface this. I am tipping Gold Coast, North Melbourne, Gold Coast Suns, Marvel Stadium. I am tipping Gold Coast, but I am putting the caveat out there. Do not be surprised if North pulls a stunner here because this is a perfect situation. Coming off a crap game, Clarko can get him going. Suns sometimes a little sketchy sometimes traveling out of Queensland down to Victoria. It's at Marvel Stadium. It's under the lid. Helps. I think that helps North skills a little bit. Will not shock me if North pulls a stunner here. Tipping Gold Coast, but I'm putting it on the thing. Do not be surprised if North pulls a stunner here at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, as good as the Suns are in Darwin, post Darwin, the last few years they've gone
Yep.
1-2 in several seasons. So yeah, their post Darwin record has been a little bit of an issue. Of course, the last couple of years, the Suns have kind of struggled to win on the road in general. Again, with Darwin being the exception, but I don't know. I mean, I think Damian Hardwick is smart enough to kind of really tell the players, really stress that in terms of like, hey, everything we want is in front of us. We just have to play consistent footy. We have to play efficient footy, and we have to pick accurate. As simple as that is, how many teams don't do all three week in and week out? So I think they want to take it one game at a time. They know they've got big aspirations this year. The Suns, whether it's accurate or not, inside the four walls of the building, they think they're a flat contender. I think they can definitely push for a home final this year. But again, the proof's in the pudding. I think they've had some really good form as of late. But again, every road trip is a minefield when you're a non-Victorian team, as much as we might hate to admit it, because you're going to have to play in Victoria in September. So I
Yep.
think North is going to keep it competitive, but I'm still tipping the Suns as well. I think they're going to win by 3 goals.
Yep. I think it should be a cracker.
Three
This
goals,
could,
3 goals and some change.
yeah, the next one I think could be game of the round. It could be a potential game of the season for me.
Yeah.
GMHBA Stadium as the Cats host the top of the table Swans. I will let you tip this one first. Who do you like in this one? Cracker here on a
Ooh,
twilight down on Saturday night.
boy. I again, you hate to say it, but if it wasn't in Geelong, I would tip the Swans. But again, I think with the Pies kind of exposing some of the Swans' vulnerabilities, that it was kind of a hangover game for the Swans in that way. But no, I mean, I think Geelong will win by less than a goal. I think it really will come down to the wire, but I think the Cats are just in really good form, and they're getting help in terms of like they have guys who, much like Frio, they have guys all over the ground who are going to put their hands up when it's crunch time and really deliver the goods. So I think Jeremy Cameron's going to have another big game. But then again, I think Nick Blakey is going to have a big game for the Swans. So it'll come down to the wire. But I think Geelong is going to win in the final few minutes here.
This is gonna be so interesting because one of the things that I worried about when the Swans played a gather round at Norwood Stadium was the fact that Norwood is a skinny ground that's long, a lot like GMHBA. And
Mm,
surprisingly, Sydney did well with their handball game at this place. Geelong kind of started to put in, so we get to see who's better at the forward handball game. This is going to be fascinating. I
yeah.
agree with you because this game is at GMHBA. This one terrifies me as a Swan supporter. Two games, slow starts, keeping teams around them when they probably have much more talent and are better when it comes to it. Gonna tip the Cats in this one, but I will say this. If you are right and the lizard gets off, that is gonna be deadly for this Cat side because the handball game takes Tommy Stewart out, and Tommy Stewart is one of those, he really helps kickstart the Cats off halfback. So if he's not getting intercept marks because he's too busy trying to come up attacking forward handballs, it could be a long day for that Cats defense, but it could be the same thing for the Swans defense with the small forward and the Dash brothers of Bailey Smith and Max Holmes. Who takes what? Does James G. Jordan go to one? Does Rowbottom get the other? It's going to be fascinating. I cannot wait for this one. This is going to be an absolute ripper. I am terrified as a small supporter, but if I put my neutral hat on for just a second, this could be game of the round. It could be game of the season because you have two teams. This could be a preview of the grand final. That's how much I love both of these teams because again, the Cats are always there, and the Swans seem to have found a sweet elixir that could get them very deep into September. It'll be fascinating on this one. We'll go up to the MCG. The talk will only be a bit about Pendles, but for me, the talk needs to be about Collingwood taking on West Coast. And I'm saying this now. It's the same thing with Gold Coast and North Melbourne. I am going to tip Collingwood, but I'm going to put a huge keep an eye out because West Coast is humming. They're playing well. And I think this Collingwood side is still too inconsistent. And I think the pageantry and the circus that is Pendles could take away the focus of the Collingwood Magpies. This is ripe for West Coast to throw a stunner here, tipping pies, but thinking West Coast could throw a dagger into all of this if they play their best football.
I'm going to agree and disagree here. I think West Coast will be leading at three-quarter time, but the Pies will win by 4 goals.
Mhm.
Again, I disagree in terms of like Pendles being a distraction. I think it has been up till this point, but I think Craig McRae is a smart enough coach to be like, hey, we're not going to let him down on his big day. We're gonna actually put our head over the pill and really bring it to them in the final quarter. So I think that's how it'll go. But like you said, there's obviously warning signs. The Pies clearly have problems, but I think they'll step up big fourth quarter and will win by 4 goals. Eagles, again, Eagles can compete every week. It's just I think it's going to be at the MCG. Obviously it'll be a big Collingwood crowd. They'll definitely show up for that. So I don't think the Eagles can seal the deal. I think it'll be again another game where we see encouraging signs from their kids, Harley Reid included, but won't quite get across the line.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm
No,
tipping the Pops.
yep, no, and I get it, but here's my only rebuttal to that is that because that's extra pressure, we can't let Pendles down. Will Collingwood come out tight? And could West Coast capitalize on a team that's so worried about making sure that they perform on Pendle's day? Again, I know this is an older team. You don't think so, but there are some youngsters that have in around. Will they be affected by the fact that we can't disappoint Pendles on his day? Will that affect some of them? That's the biggest thing that I would say on that. But no, I agree with you. Think Collingwood's just too good. But again, I've seen weirder things in the AFL for sure. Even more weirder is this next one because this is a coin toss game for me at the lightest. and an annoying one to tip for me because I don't know what to get because neither of these teams are too damn under. I can't get my head around either of them. Port
Yeah,
Adelaide or Yartapulti take on Carlton at the Adelaide Oval. You go first because for me, this is, I have a tip, but I am not confident in either of these teams.
I was just looking at it myself, and it's just like, yeah, nothing really jumps out. I mean, these are two teams that are pretty mediocre at the moment, and obviously Carlton has the interim coach effect or the interim bump or whatever you want to call it. Again, we know Fraser won't be the permanent coach, but I mean, again, if they can kind of, just play some cohesive pressure based footy, win more stoppages, stop the clumsy turnovers, I think they'll win. But I think Port, they ran out of gas in Darwin because they're not used to playing in Darwin, and Gold Coast is just a better side. Again, there's some signs of life in this rebuild. They're definitely in a spot where they can build around some players. Horn Francis is still young. They've got Ewan McKinley. I mentioned him earlier. Joe Richards, you mentioned him in your team with the round. There's some kids there that are, again, Georgiadis had an off week, but he's definitely kicked backs of goals in the past. I think there's some talented kids there. It's just they're kind of throwing the magnets around. They're kind of just experimenting to see, which of their young kids can answer the bell, kind of put their hands up to, uh, you know, uh, make a case for being a new part of this new regime. Like there's definitely talent on the list, but I think again, there's not much to get excited about in this game in a vacuum. I'm tipping Port by a goal.
I'm tipping Port in this one. But I'm a little leery because, again, coming off a very humid, warm game, I think it zaps you. I think it takes multiple weeks to kind of fully recover from that. Carlton's buzzing because of a huge win, an upset. You're getting that, but sometimes the second game is when reality comes back to you a little bit because you don't have that shock of everything. Tipping Port only because I think there's more things going for them being at home. Carlton's second
Sure.
game under a new coach. There's more making me lean towards that. But again, will not shock me if Carlton win this because again, coming off a hot game, a humid game, sometimes it takes multiple weeks to fully get yourself fully back. So we'll have to see again. That's a coin toss one that I find fascinating
Right.
is the prime time game on Saturday night. Oh boy,
What were they
the
thinking?
the schedule makers for sure they did not have a hindsight's 2020 for sure. So
Yeah.
we'll move to Sunday afternoon footy, Saturday evening for you and I as your GWS Giants at NG Stadium host the two-time defending premiers, the Brisbane Lions, at here. I'll ask you this, sir. Can you tip your Giants, or is this Lions team just too good?
I wish I could, trust me, but I don't think it'll be a blowout though. I think I'm tipping reluctantly the Lions by 2 goals. I think, being back at home will help. That's another thing that hasn't gone the Giants' way. They had a bunch of road trips early on in the season when we weren't healthy, and that is just gonna sap your confidence if you're dropping games like that. So being back at home will help. Playing that ground the way we play it will help. I think kind of, Brisbane again, just, minus Zorko, minus some of their other playmakers who, Logan Morris has been a bit quiet the last few weeks. Dunkley's been good, Charlie Cameron's been good, but they neither of them have really dominated. And Zach Bailey, he's normally great, but it's been a minute since he had a huge game himself. So I think the Lions are just kind of treading water. Again, they've got time to get it right, but you wonder if they really have the depth to push for another flag this year. I think they're in a little bit of a more challenging position than it looks on paper. So yeah, I think the Lions will win, but I think the Giants will give them a scare.
Brisbane for me, but I agree. GWS at home. Sometimes this is that rev up the king the Kingy can give to him. Hopefully they get off there. And again, this is a Brisbane Lions team. They've been shaky. So this is one they need. They cannot drop this one. If you're the Brisbane Lions, you cannot drop this one. The Giants, this is a perfect setup for you to nip a team that is not playing as good a football as you. And I'd be interested to see, does Zorko come back after being rested last week, which I think will help their runoff halfback. So, and then I think a great one to end the round, Marvel Stadium, is the Western Bulldogs take on Nam, the Melbourne Demons. Fascinating one for me. I'm tipping the D's. Too many injuries, too inconsistent. Bont is not playing really well because I think he is absolutely running on fumes. Nam is absolutely in fuego right now. I just think there's too much for me to go with the D's. But again, the doggies, they've got some super talents. If they have a great game, who knows what can happen?
I hate to disagree here, but I think this is the one game of the round that could get ugly. I'm tipping the D's by 7 goals. Reason being, just like, I mean, D's are on a hot streak. I think their disposal efficiency, the way they've been moving the footy up the ground, obviously Max Golan is at the center of all of that. But, again, there's plenty of unsung heroes in that group. And I think, Bailey Fritsch has been kind of an unsung hero for them up forward. Van Ruin has been a positive for the most part. And Cos Pickett, we mentioned him as well, of course. So there's stars everywhere you look with the D's. I think they could get off to a fast start, and Bulldogs aren't going to quit. Even with the injury list that they have, they're going to try to compete, but I just don't think they're going to have enough petrol left in the tank to hang with the D's. So I'm tipping the D's to win big. I wish the doggies were in a better situation. I feel bad for their fans, but this season has just gone off the rails in record time. I think when they finally get some of their players back in a few weeks, they'll be able to finally get back in the winners column. But their percentage, as we mentioned, is terrible. They just are running on fumes because they're shorthanded.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. So it's going to be a fascinating one. Well, as per usual, Rick, you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours about football. That's just how much we love talking about it. And as per usual, we took ourselves some time on to this. It is always great to talk with you. I never want to end an episode and not be able to catch up with you as you are rocking that wonderful LA Dragons polo t-shirt. Tell me, how are things going for the Dragons right now, and how excited are you that the USAFL season is back starting up again?
Oh, it's always a great time. We're building something exciting at the Dragons. Damian Hicks is our new coach. He has a lot of Sandful experience. He coached and played in a few really good winning sides over there, and he kind of came to the Dragons indirectly, just through social stuff. He kind of was involved with Fraggers, John Fragomeni, who founded the club. Got to know Bobby Wagner and a few like old school Dragons who convinced him to take the head coaching gig, and it's been amazing in terms of like his attention to detail. We're doing more film sessions, doing more practical conditioning, more game day style trainings. It's been really good. We've got a lot of new guys this year, almost equal in terms of new Aussies and new Americans. So there's a good returning core. We did okay in Division 2 last year, but we really want to push for getting that D2 flag because we've done it before. Dragons won the D2 flag in 2014, a couple of years before I joined the club. And, if we win Div 2, that means we're in D1 next year. So it's been exciting in terms of like myself, seeing, some of the skills I'm improving on with Hicksy and with some of the new guys who are, that we're learning from and we're getting ready for game action. So we're really excited about some of the new Americans, and we've also got some experienced Aussies who are new to the club. But it's funny how these things happen. Hicksy again played high level footy in Adelaide. He lived in Sydney for a bit. That's where he met his wife. He coached with UTS. Of course, you're familiar with them in the Sydney AFL League. And he came to LA because his wife had a job transfer over here. So again, just met Aussies around LA and got involved with the Dragons socially. And he's been really good in terms of like whiteboard sessions and just like figuring out the strategy because we want to play structured footy. We want to play disciplined footy. We're excited about what we're building. Obviously, Metro season, you guys play 10 aside on occasion. I know you had the 80-35 tournament, and we play 10 aside in our preseasons as well, where we just split into two teams, focus heavily on skill development and, getting the mastering fundamentals of the game with a smaller field, 10 on 10, like it's been good in terms of historically, that's how we've developed a lot of the younger American guys, including myself. And then, just kind of having a way for us to, just iron sharpens iron, right? But I think we're getting
Mhm.
tired of hitting each other and starting actually this last weekend was the last round of Metro footy. So starting on Memorial Day weekend, that's when we're gonna be playing other teams. Rob Dollar Cup is that weekend. It's in Santa Barbara. Of course, it's a charity tournament that we do every year. This year it's in Santa Barbara. It's been in different locations in the past, but that's a very important week for our club. And it's going to be 10 aside for that, but then 18 aside a season from June onwards. And then, of course, Nationals is back in Florida this year. So, but yeah, we're fairly healthy coming out of preseason and Metro season. I'm feeling pretty fit. I think the rest of the boys are too. And in terms of just being able to kind of be around the guys again and just have the social aspect of it is awesome too. We're even getting a documentary filmed about us this year, which is pretty interesting. Like training feels like an episode of The Office because like you're always aware of the camera. But no, it's great. This guy Mike, he's based up in the Valley here in LA. Fun fact: his wife works for the LA Rams, and he just I forget if he had reached out to Alex Brent, president of the Dragons. I can't remember if he reached out to Alex or vice versa, but yeah, he's been filming our trainings and our Metro games. We're still working on some licensing agreements, but yeah, we're hopefully going to have it on YouTube or maybe on streaming. That would be amazing in terms of the exposure that would
Mhm.
give us. So we're lucky to have that opportunity. And we've also separately been filming our Metro games and breaking down films. So it's been fun, just kind of taking a little more of a professional approach in terms of how we develop our players and how we use people. It's the Metro season is a good time to experiment, so we're figuring out what our strengths and weaknesses are and just trying to, incrementally get better. So how are the Roosters doing?
Well, unfortunately, due to some personal things, I haven't really been around the Roosters as much. I know they had 80-35. Unfortunately, with some of my communications with them, unfortunately, they've been having some recruiting issues a little bit. Again, not trying to not airing anything out, but it has been just very frustrating. I don't think 80-35 turned out as well as they wanted to. Again, I try to keep track of them as much as possible. But and unfortunately, due to some personal things and just scheduling things is just not something that I'm able to do, and so I've stepped away from that. But again, I wish them nothing but the best. I try to keep in contact with as many that I can, but unfortunately, just life sometimes makes situations a little bit harder. So, but no, things like that when it comes to it. So, but that was going to do it. That was it for our episode here. Again, keep track, ladies and gentlemen. More footy coverage still to come. Again, we've got soon to come some more reviews of some of the state leagues. So that'll do it for this episode of Donnie's Bulls. And we'll be back with more footy coverage very, very soon.